Hi, my name's Blaine Wilker, and I am a level designer. Ravenwood is a dungeon I made in the Skyrim Creation Kit 2.0. I designed the dungeon to have multiple paths and side rooms that the player has the option to explore. These are based on a few of the different playstyles that a player will use in Skyrim. The experiences I wanted the player to have while playing this level is of tension and mystery. The design of the entry room was to introduce the player to an easy enemy, skeletons, that can be dealt with in a few seconds. The combat difficulty will ramp up as the player comes into contact with more difficult and different types of enemies. In this section, the player should feel powerful while fighting a weak enemy. This is designed to throw the player off when they go further in and engage in much harder fights. To make the levels more interesting, I have scripted events and puzzles. My first event happens if the player takes the left-hand route from the entrance. This is designed to build tension and cause the player to panic for a second while not providing too hard of a challenge. The crypt is a treasure hunt for the key to open the door to the next level. If the player has already explored the side rooms, they will probably have found that key and thus gain access to the lower dungeon. This is also designed to prevent players from just running through the level without engaging in combat. The locked door and gates are designed to slow the pace of the level and give the player the opportunity to loot. In the first design of this room, it was around twice as big, with another small room off the back that held the door to the next level. But from comments during playtesting, I realized that the room was much too large and empty for the tension I was trying to have the player feel. After the player gets through the crypts, they will enter into a cave with two paths, one with its entrance lit up. As you may have noticed earlier, I'm using candles to guide the player down the desired path while also giving them opportunities to take alternate routes if they wish. After taking the lit path, the player will enter a room full of bandits. This room increases the combat difficulty of the dungeon by pitting the player against a group of bandits with a mage supporting them. There is also a room off to the side with an additional mage and fighter who will join the battle if the player gets too close to their door. This combat encounter is designed to catch the player off guard with an ambush. I have also included an armory to help equip the player if they have the misfortune to enter this dungeon at a low level. A supply of potions and scrolls can be found here as well, to help with the tough fights to come. Included in this level, there are a few books that the player can find to gain a bit of the backstory to the dungeon. In order to break up the continuous combat through the levels, there are a few sections that are built for platforming, as well as hidden routes that clever players will use to move through the level quicker. The upper route is the quicker of the two paths, but it is also a bit more hidden. While the lower path is a bit longer, it has a supply cache and an additional enemy. The player can use Whirlwind Shout to help cross over both of these sections. In the first iteration of these areas, this room and the connecting hallway was much more linear, with only one path that the player could take. After playtesting, the area felt too long and boring, so I made a few different designs to open the area up and make it more dynamic, finally arriving at the current build. The next major encounter is with two powerful mages after a trap, and if the player does not turn off this trap, they are caught between a rock and a hard place. They can also bait the mages through the trap and use it to help deal with them. When I first designed this section of the level, I had another larger room after the room with two mages. This room was filled with Daedra, but due to time constraints and the inability to come up with a good reason to have it in this level other than to prolong the experience, I eventually ended up cutting. After the player has dealt with the two mages, they will head to the final section of the dungeon. This is where the difficulty really ramps up, and the player has to be on their A game in order to complete the dungeon, taking advantage of all the items and skills provided to the player thus far. The enemies here consist of both mages and Daedra with enchanted weapons. These encounters are designed to make the player feel powerless and stressed. The final encounter of the Ravenwood dungeon is a boss battle with a strong necromancer who is supported by a few minions and has the ability to resurrect the dead. This was done to push the player to their limits by having a powerful caster attack from afar while they are dodging a melee fighter chasing them down. During this encounter, I wanted the player to experience fear, hopelessness, and resolve. When the player finally finishes the fight, they are rewarded for their further adventures with some good loot and the answers to the mystery of the dungeon.